Hello, good evening from central London, and I am excited to be back. And the topic today for the live stream is, of course, buy to let. Buy now or regret it later. I want to be sharing more about what I mean with this with regards to certain areas. To be more specific, UK hotspots when it comes to buy to let. Yes, I'm sure a lot of people didn't think they'll be hearing this kind of a comment or statement so soon. And I'm going to put it out there right now. I'm not talking about any kind of boom. We're still far, if there is any boom coming anytime soon, we're still far from anything like that. But listen, before we dive in, we're going to be also looking at UK hotspots, UK buy to let hotspots, and I'm going to be revealing the capital buy to let of the UK. We're going to see who is the winner so far for 2024, the city that has the most or is most popular, most trending when it comes to buy to let. Before we do that, I just want to make sure that you can hear me first of all, you can see me, so we can get that out of the way and we can start diving into some articles. If you haven't been here before, we do share information. I interpret data as I see it. I always love questions, and I always love it to be interactive with everyone. So please feel free to just leave your comments, whether you love it or you hate it. Okay, guys, I can see here, can see and hear you. Amazing. Thank you, Stephen. Much appreciated. Amrita, thank you for joining. And so, yeah, we have a few people. This is going live in different platforms. So let's go on and start with the first article I have here, which is going to be the most relevant, which would be, let's crack on with this one. I'm revealing it from the very beginning. London is back. London is back in favor as rental market stabilizes. And again, we are talking from a perspective of buy to let, okay? So we are talking within the context of buy to let. London is back as the rental market stabilizes. So London has bounced back as the buy to let capital of the UK with 13%. Those are double digits. 13% growth in new buy-to-let landlords between 2023 and 24, compared to just over 4% in the previous year, so 2022. Now, after stuttering in 2023, London's strong continued tenant demand and the broad array of property types buoyed the market once more last year. So this data is from Simply Business, which we'll dive into a little bit later as well. And by the way, we are going to be looking at not only rental prices of different regions and different cities and comparing, we're also going to be looking at the market in terms of landlords and see how they are, what kind of appetite they have, whether it's for investing or whether it's for selling, buying more properties, and the difference between each landlord as well. What type of landlord investor is actually looking to grow their portfolio, if any? So while Glasgow topped the chart in 2022-2023 with 11.95% growth, last year saw it fall back to the bottom of the board with a much more conservative 7% growth. So listen, to put this into perspective, I mean, I've already revealed it here. You could probably already see it. London is at the very top at 13%. But where Glasgow was at the top of the chart, so this was Glasgow, now it's at the bottom of the chart. Any ideas why that may be? Any landlords in Glasgow? Would love to hear your comment as to why Glasgow has gone from the top to the very bottom with just 7%. But let's look at the cities that have double digits here. We have London at the top, 13%. Birmingham just following next, 12%. Leicester, 12%. Just behind that, we have Leeds and then Manchester. I mean, who would have thought? I'm sure a lot of people, especially a lot of landlords I've spoken to previously, they would, especially the landlords who've been investing outside of London and saying it's all about North. You know, why would anyone buy in London? Why would anyone have a buy to let in London? And here we are looking at these charts doing much better than properties in the North. And of course, there are advantages in investing in the North. Most evident is going to be the amount of you could probably buy 2 or 3 properties by the time you buy one property here in London. But there are disadvantages as well. Okay, so cracking on with this article, and then you have some in between. Now, cities that I see that are quite good, especially with landlords I speak to immediately. I mean, we all know Manchester's a great city, and when it comes to buy to let in the last few years, it's done amazing. Bristol, I like, but I think it's because I know the city and it's close to London as well. So anyone sort of that has properties in London that wants to expand and look at other cities, that's why I like Bristol specifically. It's close to home. But then we have Birmingham as well. Absolutely cracking city, and I think it's actually I believe it's undervalued. I think Birmingham is a great city. Was doing really well, and then for some reason it just flattened. But Birmingham is a great city as well. And then you have Leicester and Leeds further up. Okay, so here we have London is also home to the largest group of multi-property landlords in the UK, followed by Manchester, Birmingham, and Nottingham. So let me break that down as what that means. So London, as I understand, has the highest concentration of multi-property landlords than anywhere else in the UK. Now, I always thought that was the case anyway, but it seems that separation and the difference is just so much more right now than what it was before, and it's growing. So this multi-property landlords, and these are, by the way, and if you've been following my channel before and videos and lives and everything else, one thing you will know is that these are the landlords that are expanding their portfolio. It's the smaller accidental landlords that are deciding to exit the market. They are saying, you know what, we've had enough, whether that's regulations or whether that's a high cost or whatever that may be. Now, there is something to point out here, that regardless of the articles that I'm reading now, and the article will point this out, by the way, the trend at the moment is that these type of buy-to-let landlords, these multiple property landlords, are growing. There continue to be fears and there continue to be concerns with regards to high regulation or tighter regulations, especially the Renters' Rights Bill, and yet also high costs continue to be a major challenge, whether that be HMOs with utility bills, whether that be mortgage costs and the cost of compliance. I know that there are questions here, and I will get to them one by one, I promise. So, as we go through this article, we'll also be looking at some other regions in the UK, by the way, and London. So Simply Business says that it's possible that stamp duty increases, higher mortgage rates, and stricter energy efficiency, I missed that one, regulation may make portfolio ownership less appealing or simply unattainable for landlords. In this context, houses in multiple occupations may become increasingly attractive investment route. The UK HMO hotspots all linked as areas of high rental demand, with strong student and youth population. And the students are going to be the big one here, especially when you have places like London, Birmingham, Bristol, Manchester, and all the ones that you can see here on the screen. Now, if you're familiar with any of these cities, especially when it comes to London, you'll know that there are some prestigious universities scattered across the city. And these type of universities not only attract people from all over the UK, but also international students from across the world. So this is a demand that continues to be there. Fair enough, during the pandemic, that pretty much disappeared, and it took a while for that to pick up pace. Actually, much longer than I actually had anticipated, but we got there. And London is always manic. London is always in high demand, whether it's those young professionals or whether it is those students. So there's no surprise that when it comes to HMOs, these type of cities are the ones that are really being targeted, and when you have higher population as well. Now, with regards to population itself, if you're not familiar, what we know now is that half of the population, not only here in the UK, worldwide, actually lives in urban areas. So whether it's cities or surrounding those cities in urban areas. Now, last time I looked, I think it was like 8 billion of us, if my numbers are correct. So that's 4 billion people in urban areas and in cities. So one thing that I also read in an article was that by 2050, that number is expected to double. So I don't know how that works. So I guess, if we are 8 million, there's 4 million, and it's going to double to 8 million. Are we all going to be living in urban areas? Well, no, because the population also grows. So who knows where we're going to be in terms of population overall by 2050. Okay. So let's go back here. I'm going to finish this article. Once I finish this article, I'm going to go through some questions that are coming up. Okay, guys? So, Cardiff is also a great little, I say little city in comparison to London. It's a great city as well, although further up than what I'm comfortable with. It's a great city and some great opportunities coming from there. So, on top of regulatory complexity, rising costs are major issue for landlords, with 38% reporting they consider them to be the biggest threat to the rental market. Let me repeat that. On top of regulatory complexity, more specifically, the Renters' Rights Bill and everything else that has come along with it, rising costs are a major issue for landlords. 38% consider them to be the biggest threat to the rental market. Over a third, that's 35%, say they saw monthly mortgage repayments increase in 2024. That's 35% of landlords said that they saw their mortgage repayments increase. Now, up from 31% in 2023. But get this, of that percentage, 10% have seen monthly repayments increase between £500 and £1,000. Those are not small numbers. So 10% of that 35% said that their mortgage had increased between £500 and £1,000. So where's that money coming from? Well, what we do know is that rentals have increased substantially as well over the course of the last 4 to 5 years. In fact, when it comes to London, between 2021 and 2024, give or take, a little bit less, a little bit later, but over 30%. So all of these rising costs are contributing, of course, to that rental increase, but also tighter regulations and the lack of properties also is a big factor. I'm sure you'll agree. So what as we come back here. So Julie Fisher, Executive Simply, 2025 will be a game changer for UK landlords with new regulations and rising costs reshaping the market. It's incredibly telling that we're starting to hear landlords talk about availability of tradesmen in the context of their investment decisions, driven in a large part by the minimum energy performance certificate. We know from our research that half of landlords need to make improvements to reach EPC ratings of C, and over a third report they will need to spend up to £10,000 to comply. Though challenges remain, the importance and resilience of landlords and the market should not be underestimated. Rental demand remains high as people seek flexible housing to suit their studies and work. And landlords that are able to follow and adapt their changes effectively can absolutely still find opportunities. So, rental income and capital growth continues to play in the UK housing market. Now, we're going to be looking at the trends just after this. But, as I wrap up that article, something comes to mind that stuck with me. One of the biggest challenges as well with landlords, and this just goes in life in general, is the old saying, which is you continue to do the same thing over and over again and expect a different result. That is the definition of insanity. And I say this within the context that landlords, at least those old school landlords, for example, 10, 15 years ago, had cheap money. Buy to let was pretty much, get a mortgage and, fix an odd leak here or there, pay a bill. Those days are gone. Tighter regulations, more complexity, higher costs, and so forth and so forth. So those days are gone. And you continue to do the same thing. Well, right now, as the market has changed, you're not going to get the same results. So what we want to do is adapt to those changes. And if you're not familiar with the webinars that we do, they are exactly with regards to the changes that are coming with the Renters' Rights Bill, which can come as soon as spring this year. Literally, we're talking about just a couple of months, 3 months in spring. So if you want to keep up to date, there is a 90-minute free webinar taking place in just 3 weeks. The link will be on the actual description. Okay. If it's not, just send me a comment. We'll be sure to put it in a pinned comment, and we'll put it up there. I'm actually diverting here a little bit, but I'm actually quite excited and quite proud of the team, by the way, because we've been doing these videos for a number of months or a few years actually, and we have one particular video that has been extremely popular. Last time I looked, it's almost reaching the 200,000 views. This how popular this video is. If you haven't checked it out, please jump onto our channel, subscribe, but also watch that specific video that was launched on Saturday. Okay, guys, I have questions here. I'm going to go through these before I go to the next article, which you don't want to go anywhere, because this next article is talking about landlord confidence starting to grow despite legislative changes. And it talks a little bit about capital gain tax, and also with regards to what landlords are doing with regards to rental increases. Are they increasing? Are they not increasing? And what kind of impact that's having? We're going to be diving. These have some very interesting numbers and figures. If you like stats, you want to stay on. Okay, so let's go on through one of these questions. Danny, I was thinking of selling. Do you think I should wait? Oh, Leslie, that's a big question there, and a question that I probably could answer best if I knew your personal situation. I know that this answer doesn't help you. So let's talk about maybe perhaps a scenario. That's the best way I can put this through, because I don't know your scenario or your story. So let's talk about a landlady at the moment who is selling. She bought her property back in 2001 in London. She's been playing with the idea, should I sell, should I not sell, for a number of months, possibly even 2 years. And, she was dipping her toes in the water, so to speak. And for the last couple of years, put the property on the market at a very high price. And now's the time for her to actually sell. And she's put it at the right price. Why does she have to sell? Well, she's an old school landlady. 2001, she bought this property. She has others. She's also have sold a few, and probably keeping just one or two. For her, she's cashing out. She's reached the time of her life where she doesn't want to bother with it anymore, and things are not like what they used to be, as I just said to you, with regards to buy to let. So for her, she's gonna, as she sells, she's gonna make a ton of money. She'll have to pay capital gain tax, but she's all good. She's fine moving on. Now, there are other landlords who perhaps just purchased their property 5 years ago. And, 3 to 5 years, buy to let is a long game. And if you want to then sell your property within a very small amount of years, your property, it's not even going to have been worth your while. So someone like that, as long as the numbers are working, then just keep the property. I would say wait. There is no rush. That is my opinion. But again, it depends on your particular property. If you have a property that's attracting the wrong tenants, again, that is a big reason to sell, especially with the Renters' Rights Bill coming our way. Anyone just joining, we have talked about UK hotspots when it comes to buy to let. We looked at a chart of 10 cities, and we looked at what was coming at the top and what's at the bottom. The funny thing is that the city that was at the top just a couple of years ago is now at the very bottom of that chart when it comes to buy to let. How do you see, this is recorded, by the way, you can always rewind. How do you see landlord confidence evolving over the next year despite ongoing tax and regulatory changes? How do you see landlord confidence evolving? So, evolving, actually, we're going to see that in the next article. It's evolved. It's almost done a 360, to be honest with you. So let's see how that goes. Okay, so let me see here. With the new regulation, what area would you recommend to buy so I don't have a problem with tenants? Well, you'll have to do your research, Rita, but you certainly want to make sure that you get. It depends what attractive tenants is to you. To me, attractive tenants is tenants that can provide a robust financial referencing, and also they can provide a track record. And the Renters' Rights Bill is going to make that so much challenging for tenants. I hope that helps. Usually, major cities would work well. That's what I would do. I'll keep away sort of your rural areas or your suburbs. That's just my personal opinion. We have more questions here, but I will go to them in a few minutes as we go into a few more articles. And so we've looked at UK hotspots when it comes to buy to let and how landlords are actually adjusting. Okay, so this article is landlords' confidence starting to grow despite legislative changes. So we have landlord confidence, private sector is on the up as buy to let remains the investment of choice for many people. New data from Pegasus Insights shows confidence was up despite the introduction of high capital gain tax in October budget and the potential impact of the Renters' Rights Bill, which the government has committed to introducing this year. So we can see that a lot of that confidence has played out in the capital here in London with 13% growth when it comes to new landlords, new buy-to-let, compared to just 4% the previous year. So London is now the buy-to-let capital of the UK, as we saw on the previous article. So the latest landlord trends report Q4 24 shows that landlord confidence about the future of their own lettings business has increased year on year. 37% saying they feel good or very good about their prospects. Q4 2024 compared to 33% Q4 in 2023 Q4. Since mid-2023, there has been a general upward trend. The proportion of landlords feeling optimistic about the prospects for their overall lettings business, unsurprisingly, are landlords who report making the largest profit are most likely to feel upbeat. So landlords that are making the largest profit are the ones that are really feeling positive. I mean, in fact, we have 71% are feeling positive. With this falling to falling to 33% for those making smaller profits. Well, that's no surprise, right? Those reporting smaller profits are saying 33% optimistic, and for those, and 8% for landlords who are either breaking even or making a loss. Okay, so on a quarterly basis, three measures showed a small uptick with optimism about business prospects from 32% in Q3 2024 to 37%. So a small increase there, right? Positivity about capital gain tax up from 14% to 17%, and optimism about rental yields nudging slightly from 36% to 38%. Interesting. Yeah. So interesting. So when we see that business, the optimism of landlords when it comes to business prospect, that's up by 30%. Well, not up by 30%, but it is in the 30% plus. Then when we look at yields, that percentage, if I'm not mistaken, was 14 to 17%. Landlords being optimistic. I would have thought that would have been higher, to be honest with you. I find that quite low. But certainly there is more optimism when it comes to yields, and that can clearly be seen from these cities that we've just seen. And then, of course, we see the other metric, which was, what was it? 36% the rental yields. And optimism about rental. Oh, sorry, I got that wrong. So the rental yields is 30 plus percentage. That makes more sense. Okay. So let's move down to some more questions. So we have, do you really think now is a good time to buy? Uh, the best way I can share this is probably talking about properties in London and the prices that I'm seeing, the house prices in London. And this goes for many places in the UK. I'm seeing prices flat for quite a few years, okay? Easily for the last 10 years. And yet rental prices have increased substantially. I'll give you one example of one property. So one of the properties that I've seen, that property, I'm going to give you two examples. One is £1 million, or actually it's 1.1 million. And that property before the pandemic was worth 1.1, or during the pandemic. Now that rental on that property, this is around the King's Cross, St. Pancras, new postcode area. That property was renting for an average of around about, I think it was 2,800, give or take, something like that. That property now is renting for like 3.5 grand. So rental increase, and yet that house price continues to be the same. And actually, those numbers may be wrong. I think it's closer to 4 grand, if my memory serves me right. But let me give you this other example. This one is an exact numbers. Okay, this property is in Camden. This property is on the market for just below £700,000, and the rental for this property, get this, is £3,200. £3,250. Now it's due to increase this year to 3.5 grand. Now that property was worth round about the same 3 to 4 years ago, and the rent on that was only around about 2,750. So I think there's great opportunities to be seen at the moment, and I don't think those opportunities are going to be around for too long. If we know anything about London, London continues to be flat and then suddenly booms, and it hasn't boomed for a while. So there you are. You know, a quote comes to mind. Be greedy when others are fearful, and be fearful when others are greedy. At the moment, there's a lot of fear out there. A lot of fear out there. I don't know if I switched that around, that saying, but yeah, and yet there is a lot of greed elsewhere, which we could talk about a bit as well. There's a lot of greed elsewhere, and yet people don't seem to be fearful. Well, let's see what happens with that, and I'll share with you a little bit more as to what I mean outside of property. Okay, so this gradual improvement sentiment comes despite growing concerns. Around 3/4 of landlords. Let me just remove something actually here. Okay, so around 3/4 of landlords think the bill will be negative for their own lettings business. 43% significantly so. This rises to 65% who believe the bill will have a significant negative impact on the private renter sector as a whole. 65%. So, meanwhile, despite 73% of landlords saying they increased the rent to 20 in 2024, 73% of landlords increased their rent. More than 80% claim they are currently renting out at least one property at below market rates. And 62% of landlords say they plan to increase rents further this year. Those are big numbers. Those are big numbers. Okay, so let's break this down. You're looking around about 80% of landlords who've increased their rent in 2024. And that's a big number also with regards to the number of landlords who have their rent below market value, and they know it. And it's good that a lot of landlords out there are fortunate enough to be in a position to tell tenants, I'm going to keep the rent at the same rental price for 5, 7, 8 years. I love that. That's great. It's great for them to be able to do that. Not many landlords are fortunate enough to do that. Now that's caused problems. That causes problem if you decide to sell up suddenly. I mean, life throws curveballs at you, right? Things happen. Now, if you were to be in that situation where you had to refinance or sell, and you have a tendency whereby you're renting the property way below market value where the numbers no longer make sense, that is an issue. Now, I've said this before. If you are in a position where you have a tenant that's been there for years, absolutely give them a good deal. But it has to be good in terms of a win-win situation. It can't leave the landlord in a vulnerable situation. So, I mean, typically I see landlords who know and want to keep the rental of the tenants at a good rental price, and they keep that around about 10% below market rate. And I think that's sensible, because why go out into the open market, especially in today's world? Well, as we go into the Renters' Rights Bill, with the Section 21, the no fault eviction notice being removed. And why put yourself in that situation if you have a perfectly good tenant, and if you can get almost market price from them, then why not? 5-10%, dare I say, a little bit more. I hope that makes sense. And yet, what we also read here from the article was this number here. 62% of landlords say they plan to increase rents further this year. This reminds me, actually, with regards to increasing rent, I had this conversation with someone here in the office today, which is part of the plan of the Renters' Rights Bill is to get rid of the so-called rental bidding war. Now, why do I bring this up within this context? Well, because currently in the current market, you can't undervalue a rental property. You could put a property on the market right now and it could be, 20% below market value, and yet you're going to end up getting more for that property of the asking price that you put on the market. Well, Labour has decided that actually they're going to remove this. So the asking price is the asking price, and you cannot receive a penny more than the asking price itself. What's going to happen then? Well, when this new law is implemented, which is in a few months, that's the aim, then most landlords, if not all landlords, are going to go above market price. So I'll give you an example. If I'm told that my property is worth around about, £3,000, and so, you could definitely get £3,000, then previously, or at least at the moment, most landlords put it on for £3,000, and if they get a lot of demand, they get more. Because landlords will know that they no longer could do this, well, they're not going to put it for £3,000. They're going to put it for £3,500, and then, if anyone needs to negotiate downwards, then they negotiate downwards. Or if they have to adjust the price because it's so high that people don't want to see it, then that's what they'll do. That is something that we're going to see, and rental prices will increase substantially as soon as this law comes in, and you cannot take a penny more from the asking price. Landlords letting at below market rates believe they are subsidizing an average of 4.7 properties, typically by £144 each month, equating to a total of £677. The larger landlords are more likely to report letting at least some of their portfolio at below market rates, with the belief that they are subsidizing 12.8 properties each by an average of £120, total monthly of £1,500. Okay. Even with these subsidies, the average achieved rental yield remains close to Q3 2024, a 10-year high at 6.4% in Q4. So Bethan Cook, director at Pegasus, improving landlords' confidence is testament to the resilience of the buy-to-let sector and the strength of the fundamental economics underpinning this market fundamentals, which Renters' Rights Bill will only serve to reinforce. If this new bill forces more landlords to exit the market, it will further deepen the supply and demand imbalance, which pushed average rents to unprecedented levels last year. What's more, as a legislative threat builds, so does the pressure for landlords to preemptively increase rents to future-proof their business. There you are, guys. Proof of what's driving the rental increase. And this is a big factor. It's a combination of things, but this is a big factor. So Those landlords charging below market rates may currently be compromising on revenue in order to retain good tenants, but may not feel they have the option of continuing to do so in more restrictive environments. The long-term profitability trend for buy-to-let market is stable and prospects for sector remain very good. So while the rental rights bill may make landlords make it feel more difficult, the unintended consequences are likely to be much harder on tenants themselves. So, a bit of a mouthful, I know. And we're going to go through a few questions. I'm going to leave this for, we have quite a number of questions. I will get to you guys, I promise. I just want to make sure that I am keeping within the topic of the video itself. So what we have here is which areas of the rental market has seen the sharpest increase in rent over the last decade. Now, I'm going to share this article with you because this is exactly what we've been looking at. So this article is saying which areas of the rental market have seen the sharpest increase in rent over the last decade. And remember, this video is about do you invest now or regret it later? As these rent increases and as the mortgage becomes a little bit more flexible, I wouldn't call it cheap money as we, used to have prior to 2021. But yet, once those mortgages starts going down and these rentals continue to increase, then those prices, house prices, will increase. At the moment, house prices are pretty much flat. They have increased, but it's been minimal. I mean, if I'm not mistaken, we're looking at an average of 3% last year, and we're looking at an average of 4 to 5% this year. But things can change very quickly. Almost around about this time last year, they were saying that there was going to be a negative capital growth of 2024. And what we saw was actually a growth of around about 3 to 4%. Is there a window of opportunity that you may miss? I'm just interpreting the data, guys. That's all I'm doing. So, which areas have the sharpest increase in rent over the decade? So, new research from Typhon analysed latest rent market figures from gov.uk released this month. The research shows that across England, the average rent has risen by 44% over the past 10 years. Wow. I bet that more than 50% of that has happened in the last 4 years alone to 3 years. Now, the average the average is 1,369 per month. Wales has seen a similar rate of growth of 43%, although the monthly cost does remain significantly cheaper. At 777 per month. Regionally, across England, it's not London, but the East Midland that has seen the highest increase in the cost of renting, up 51% in the last 10 years. The East of England has also seen one of the highest increases, 50%, while the lowest rate of growth has been across the Northeast, 33%. However, further analysis by TIFL shows that when it comes to local rental growth, it's Salford. So we're looking at just, Manchester pretty much. That tops the table with the average cost of renting in the area increasing by 72% in the last decade. Wow. Those are crazy numbers. And of course, what Salford has been benefiting from is the ripple effect of a growing city, and this specific one being Manchester. That's what it's been benefiting from. And those are great cities to focus on if you're looking at purely yield. But, capital growth, I don't know. It will be interesting to look at. And of course, where you always win is in capital growth, which is why a lot of people decide to stick to London despite having to compromise a little bit on the yield. on the rental yield. Okay, so Leicester ranks second with an increase of 70%, with Folkestone and I keep blowing this up too much. I've lost myself. Yeah, so ranked second with increase of Folkestone and Hive, 69%, South Gloucester 69%, Thanet, and then you got Bristol, you got Manchester, Ipswich, and it goes all the way down to Stevenage. The London borough of Brent has seen the largest increase of all London boroughs at 58%, although it sits at number 25 in the overall table. I was reading something about Brent. I understand that they have a joint project with Camden, which seems very interesting. I think it is affordable homes, though, but it's a very interesting project. I was reading about it. So, in fact, rents have climbed across every single area of the UK in England and Wales, with Hartlepool seeing the smallest increase by just 14% in the last 10 years. The cost of renting has only gone one way in the last decade, and that's up, noted by CEO Open Bricks Adam Peel. So such is the consistent of the overwhelming demand for rental properties that we find ourselves facing a severe crisis across the sector, and one of the key factors causing the crisis is the lack of available homes to meet demand. Unfortunately, it doesn't look as though this market imbalance is set to be addressed anytime soon. If anything, we're seeing more landlords exit the sector due to consistent legislative changes implemented by the government. That's interesting. There is another article that we're going to be looking at that's going to be looking at specifically, there continue to be an exodus of landlords. And this article, if I'm not mistaken, is from a comment with Rightmove. In fact, I'm not going to delay this. I want to dive straight into this. Are landlords continuing to exit the market by the masses? Let's look at this article. Any truth on this? Landlords still selling, but it's no longer an exodus. So this suggests that there was an exodus, right? And we're saying that it's no longer an exodus. So Rightmove says its latest survey of the private rental market shows some landlords are still leaving, but it's no longer an exodus. And it says that there is no evidence of a surge of new sales by landlords as a result of the imminent Renters' Rights Bill coming into law, which again, if you're not familiar with that, it's coming into law. It's aiming to be in by spring this year, literally a few weeks or months, if you want to call it. And there is a video that we've published just a few days ago, being extremely popular. If you're not seeing it, head over there right now, or not right now. Head over there in the next 10 to 15 minutes once we wrap up. And I'm sure you're going to find it very interesting. And the comments there have gone crazy. Feel free to comment. So, looking at wider aspect of the rental sector, the portal says that the number of new properties are coming into market is stable compared with last year. The average advertised rent of properties coming to the market outside of London has fallen this quarter for the first time since the pre-pandemic 2019. I'm going to take a sip of water. Okay, dropping by 0.2%, not a huge amount, to just over 1,300 per calendar month. Rents are still 4.7% higher than this time last year, but this quarter's falls makes the slowest rate annual growth since 2021. I'll read that again. Rents are still 4.7% higher than this time last year, but this quarter's fall makes it the slowest rate on annual growth since 2021. So these figures come from Rightmove, which says average advertised rent in London continued to rise, reaching its 13th consecutive quarter record, £2,695 per calendar month. Okay. So supply in the rental market continues to increase, with the number of available rental properties 13% higher than the same time last year. So again, supply and rental market continues to increase, with the number of available rental properties now 13% higher than the same time last year. But nothing compared to pre-pandemic, of course. But supply is starting to stabilize. The number of prospective tenants looking to move has also dropped by 16% versus last year. However, the average number of applications per rental property is still in double digits. They are indeed. Now, you might be wondering as to why. Why has the demand decreased? I think it is also to do with there's a more affordability when it comes to mortgages. So therefore, those renters getting into or onto the property ladder. But of course, the UK government, nothing thrown to Labour, and this is also Conservatives doing, haven't managed the industry regulations, and a lot of scaremongering from the media has made tenants' lives much harder to get onto the property ladder because obviously renting has become so much more expensive. And what we do know by evidence is that renters now are taking so much longer to save money for a deposit. So some demand may be transitioned to the sales market, particularly first-time buyers, helped by by lowering mortgage rates and higher average wages. So again, I guess this is exactly what I was just saying. Some demand may have transitioned to the sales market, particularly first-time buyers, helped by lowering mortgage rates and higher average wages. So I guess also a factor to take in there, the wages as well. Agents reports that some tenants are choosing to stay put rather than move due to cost. And while there is evidence of some landlords choosing to exit the market, there are also signs that other, perhaps larger landlords are continuing to invest. Rightmove adds that the Renters' Rights Bill is just the latest change for landlords to navigate, having also had to manage wider legislative changes and affordability challenges brought on by higher mortgage rates, driving some landlords to choose to sell up. On average, 15% of homes for sale on Rightmove were previously for rent in 2024, compared with 13% in 2023. London was the most affected with the nearly 1 in 4. That's a quarter of homes for sale having previously been for rent compared with 1 in 5. The question here, the bigger question is, of those 25% of properties that were for sale, on the market for sale, that were previously rented property, how many of those properties actually went on to sell? Because if I know anything about London, is that there's always a very good percentage of properties that go onto the market that don't go on to sell. And the bigger percentage of those that don't go on to sell are going to be those sellers who are in no particular rush, or at least, their personal lives that won't change much. And a lot of those, in my view, do tend to be landlords. So how many landlords are actually dipping their toes in the water? Big number, 25%, but actually, and if I don't sell, I'll try again next year. Fair enough. That would be the huge question. How much of these are actually converting? If you are having some experience with this, please give me some insight, because I'm always interested to find out other people's experience. So you have Rightmove property expert Colleen says a first quarterly drop in rents is the culmination of several months of improvement in the balance between supply and demand, while new tenants still paying more than they were at this time last year. The pace of growth continues to slow. However, though this is the big picture of market activity, agents on the ground still tell us that the market is very hot and some areas have improved more than others when it comes to the supply and demand balance. Our data shows that the average rental property is still receiving 10 applications per property, which is lower than the peak, but still double than the pre-pandemic normal. Yeah, I mean, pre-pandemic, I'd say 5% was roundabout right. Just after the pandemic, I don't think many agents were even keeping count in terms of application. I mean, easily in London, you could reach the hundreds. And currently, I think sort of around about 10 to 15 would be probably fair. So we have a few minutes left, and I am going to go through some of these questions. But before I do, I'm also going to share a similar story, and this is directly from the Financial Advisor. So rise of the professional landlord set to take over buy-to-let sector. So rental yields are currently at high record, and yet rental purchases are at record low. So this is the topic of the video, guys. This is exactly what I'm saying to you. Rental yields are currently at record high, and yet rental purchases are at record low. Some have called the government recent budget a death knell for buy to let, but the reality is more nuanced. On the one hand, smaller landlords were already leaving the sector in droves. This was the case even before Labour's plans. In March 2023, the supply of rental properties was down by a third year on year. Higher interest rates, disappearing tax reliefs, and incoming legislation had combined turned into an existing trend. But the budget certainly hit the accelerator. Fears of an imminent hike in the capital gains tax on second properties led to a fire sale. Almost 20% of all properties on the market October were ex-rentals, as we already discussed. It's hard to find public sympathy for landlords in an overheated housing market, but there has been a greater need for a private rental sector. The good news is that it is evolving rather than dying. So what is going on? This goes to your question, which was how are landlords evolving or adjusting? And this is the answer to one of the questions put to us live. So what's going on? While thriving rental sector is part of any healthy property market, it is fair to say that the UK reached unsustainable levels of buy-to-let by around 2015, when 1 in 5 families were tenants. It is not hard to see why it was considered a good investment for those who could afford it, a combination of historical low interest rates and advantage tax reliefs. This was the era of the dinner party landlord. Typically, small investors buying single properties on a interest-only mortgage. Until 2017, landlords could deduct mortgage costs before tax, which was only paid on rental income profits. And of course, tie this into Section 21, which they removed the benefit of putting your costs against the mortgage interest. It was kill. It was death for a lot of landlords. A reset was near inevitable, and government keen to encouraging property owning rather than renting changed the rules and the market. Phasing out interest rates reliefs, this was a Section 21. Stamp duty surcharge meant costs rose, but the interest rates also started to soar. Owning and letting became far more feasible. Then you had the EPC, an increase in standards around safety, sustainability. 40% of UK carbon emissions came from property sector, but extra requirements around fire risk, mold, electrical and gas safety. So we get it. What's happened is there's been a whole bunch of regulations, costs have increased, and then a lot of landlords just didn't make any more sense. We're going to be diving a lot with regards to taxes on the next video, by the way. I think it's coming out in February, which is the taxes that really killed buy-to-let. So this is a long article. I'm not going to go through, I'm not going to bore you guys with this because we have a few minutes left. I am going to jump in to some of the questions that we have for you guys before we wrap up. So what we have here, I wanted to keep the current tenants. Okay. So what do we have here? We have a lot of questions here. Danny, buy-to-let purchases at all times low. What strategies can landlords use to maximize their returns? Look for good areas, Andrew, and HMOs is one that has been brought up time and time again. But again, HMO isn't for everyone. Get yourself a good property in a good area. Don't compromise on area because, especially with the Section 21, Section 21 being removed. Apologies, I just realized that I was referring to Section 21 being implemented for the tax interest rates, and it was actually Section 24. My apologies. Section 24 for the tax and Section 21 in regards to the no fault eviction notice. So please do ignore, you've answered this already, okay. Ray, if the rents are going up, like to know when the property price will rise. My flat in Kent also hasn't gone up. Well, that's going to vary from area to area. But if I can answer something to you, Ray, is that I can't see properties remaining flat for far too much longer, to be honest with you. We've seen them dip, we've seen them spike here and there over the course of the last few years. What we do tend to see is property will start to increase at some point. Again, I don't have a crystal ball, but all the data that we see, the confidence that we see, first-time buyers being able to get more on the property ladder, buy-to-let investors still buying. What's shifted is the type of buy-to-let investor. I see all the indications, all the lead indicators for property to increase, and it's already been predicted by Savills and other property experts. The question is, how much is it going to increase by? I mean, Savills says that they expect this year to be a modest around about 4 to 5%, if I'm not mistaken. Over the course of the next 5 years overall, the UK, I think we will look in something along the lines of 20 to 25%. Is that going to be more? I don't know. So there are rumours that lots of councils are going to bankrupt and will have to put the council tax up by 25%. What say you? I don't know. I'm going to say I would have to do some research about that more monkey business. I'm sorry, I don't have any info with regards to that. And, are you suggesting that this 25% council tax increase will be only for who? Because the tenants are the ones that are going to suffer, right? And this government claims to be protecting the tenants. So it will be the tenants paying this tax. I don't see it. And it's not because to say that politicians, it would be astonishing that politicians will go back on their word. No, whether it's Labour or any other politician. But I just don't see it under Labour government allowing a 25% increase in council tax to tenants. Could they find another way? Maybe they'll ask landlords to pay council tax and then increase 25%. Danny, how can we adapt to that upcoming renters reform bill, and what key changes should you prepare? Watch the video we released 3 days ago. That would be my best advice. There are lots of comments there. I'm answering a few of them, so feel free to put the comment there, which is with regards to the renters' rights bill. And Rayleigh, I didn't put the rent up on my tenants, even though the agents wanted to. Well, good on you, Rayleigh. Again, not all landlords are in the fortunate position to do so. And my recommendation, again, is if you have a great tenant, why wouldn't you provide them with a good rental, whereby it's a win-win situation for both parties, because you put that rent lower than 10%, like 20, 30% below market rate, that's now exposing you. That's now putting you in a challenging situation. And I'm sure you're not doing this for charity. And why would you put yourself and your family through putting yourself in a vulnerable financial risk? I did that too, Rayleigh. Wanted to keep the current tenants as they were. Very good. Amazing. That's exactly what you should do. I have not put my rents up. More you put your rentals up, the more you pay in taxes. No point. I would rather let the tenants have it. That's fair. That is fair, but also depends on what structure you have with your tax system, and if you hold your property sort of as in a business and so forth. Okay. What impact will rising interest rates have on landlords who are remortgaging their properties? So what impact will rising interest rates have on landlords who are remortgaging their properties? That's a good question. So a lot of landlords at the moment who are finding themselves in that situation this year, because obviously their mortgage is coming to an end, they are either deciding to sell up because it's not worthwhile, or of course having to improve their property to get a better rental price. And that's really what they're doing at the moment, and speaking to a good professional agent to be able to achieve the best possible price. I know there are a lot of people who say, oh, I'll do it myself. The reality is I was that person. And when I found myself many years ago, talking about 20 years ago, with my property, and was fed up with it, gave it to an agent. I ended up actually pretty much the same without the hassle. And I understood why. They have the network. They do this on a daily basis. They have the applicants. Just let them crack on and do what they need to do. That's it. So, Jonathan, that's only because I own everything outright, no mortgages. Okay. So I don't think there are more. I think there's a conversation happening here. I have something here from Stephen James. I am thinking I should focus more on long-term let or consider short-term rentals for better returns. I'm going to come back to this, Stephen. I'm going to go back to a question here. Amrita, I didn't do your question justice. Something came to mind. Go back, watch that video. But in addition, I have something for you. A 90-minute free webinar for tenants to protect themselves. What strategies landlords are currently implementing to protect themselves for the Renters' Rights Bill that will come out in the next few months, so we're told. That's a 90-minute webinar. Look on the comments. If it's not on the description, the link to register for free. If it's not on the description, have a look at pinned comment and it should be there. Okay. Apologies. I just wanted to put that out there. We have this question by Stephen James. Should I landlord mentor? Okay, I can't go through any mistakes at the moment, but I will answer this question for you, Stephen, which is, should I focus on long-term let or consider short-term rentals? You have the benefit of both. Again, there is a video on that. Long lets, short lets, these pros, cons, and everything else. If you are not a hands-on landlord, you do not want to do short-term rentals. Just stick to long-term rent. Of course, there is the option of going with an agent. We know many agents. If you need a recommendation referral, just fill in one of the forms that we have. If you're looking for an agent anywhere in the UK, we have a great network that we've built up over many years. So, if you want to do a short-term rental, even after paying an agent, yes, for short-term rental to manage it, you still be left with much more. With the short-term rental, it does come with its risks, though. Even if you do have an agent, it does come with its risks. So I'll give you an example. With a property that you can earn in the region of around about £2,000 per month, that's £24,000 on a long-term. On a short-term rental, you could be earning something along the lines of around about £58,000 for the same property. Of course, there are costs involved. When you take away the cost of the portals to be able to put these properties online, that's 20% already taken immediately. So you're left with around about 50K, give or take, when you take the VAT and everything into account. And then when you take the agent's fees and everything else and all the other costs, you're probably left with around about 35K. So you will be left with more money, but there are extremely high costs involved with that strategy. Long-term tenants, of course, you have to go through all the regulations. You have that risk as well. And you also have a lower rent, but more stable. That is a long conversation, Stephen. So unfortunately, I won't be able to help you with that completely, but I hope that helps somewhat. Is it good to do a lease options, aka rent to buy now? That's a good question. I would have to send me a comment, send me a message, Mexico, so I can actually answer that. At the moment, I wouldn't know how to answer that question right now. Okay, more monkey business. Don't just buy a house or rent, buy something. Okay, so that's pretty much it. I think we're almost done. Here is another question. Edinburgh flats are flying. Rents are only allowed to go up 3% annually unless you, the landlord, can justify it. When you say flying, Annette, I don't know if you're still online. From a rental point of view, I'm assuming within this context, but it'll be interesting if this means also from a sales point of view. Rents are only allowed to go up 3% annually unless the landlord can justify it. Interesting. I mean, they didn't want to allow that here in England. Whether that's the way it's going to go, I don't know. I doubt it. But I know that rental control has had a disastrous effect on both tenants and landlords, particularly tenants. Doesn't work. Everyone about to get their clocks cleaned. Sorry, boys. Okay, interesting. Okay, so here is the link to the webinar, but it should also be put on the actual video once it's published and recorded, which I think is there actually. I think I'm confusing myself here. So to wrap this up, we have more monkey business here with tokenized assets are the way to go forward now with cryptocurrencies. I'm not a financial advisor and I'm not a legal advisor anyway as well. So um, putting that out there as a disclaimer, this is not legal advice. This is not financial advice. Yet one thing I would say is going back to that saying that I said, crypto at the moment has gone bonkers. Shares and stocks have gone bonkers. And I'm a big fan of diversifying. Bit of crypto, a bit of crypto, some stocks, bonds, property. And yet I go back to that saying. And again, I don't know if I've reversed this, but, be fearful when others are greedy and be greedy when others are fearful. At the moment, there is a lot of greed when it comes to crypto and a lot of greed when it comes to stocks. So be fearful. And then with property, there is a lot of fear, a lot of scaremongering, a lot of fear. And yet, if the numbers make sense, could you be greedy right now? Is there a window of opportunity? Which again is the basis of this video, regardless of whether you're looking to buy more or you're thinking to keep that property. But then what you're looking for is a different strategy to be able to implement to make those numbers work. Speak to a property professional. If you're needing one and want a recommendation of an agent anywhere in the UK, just feel free to click that link. I'm sure one of my team members will put it in the comment. Hopefully they're listening in and they know that they're going to put a pinned comment for a UK referral anywhere in the UK. Okay, guys, we've talked about a lot. We've talked about buy-to-let UK hotspots. We've talked about trends of landlords, confidence up, rental yields up, tighter regulations coming our way, and it's been a good video. Thank you very much for joining. I really appreciate you guys. Subscribe, like, it really helps out with the algorithms, and we'll keep on doing more of these videos. And we have some guests coming in February for the first time. Actually, it's not the first time. We did a few last year, but after a lot of demand, people have been asking for guests, professionals from different backgrounds to be joining us. So subscribe so you don't miss a thing. Thank you very much, guys. Have a good evening and a good rest of the week.